Today we're doing a taping of the experiences of certain residents of people who live in Crawfordsville who lived through World War II. This is being done by the Montgomery County Historical Society, and our purpose is to put these in the public library and keep these tapes there as a permanent record of the experiences of residents of Crawfordsville who went through that wartime period. The tape will be the property of the Historical Society, and we want it for posterity. Now, when you're talking about your experiences, Marion, I hope that you will approach this as though you were talking to your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren, and they said, "Grandpa, you were in World War II. What did you do?" So that they'll be able to get that tape out and look at it long after you're dead and gone. Now, I would like you to start out by simply give us your full name, your date of birth, and where you were born.
Okay, my name is Marion B. The B is Billsland Cooper, and the B stands for my mother's maiden name, of course. I was born in Hillsboro, Indiana, about 1.5 miles east of Hillsboro, and I was actually born in the home there. It was back in June of 13th, 1915. That was back before everybody went to the hospital to be born.
Mm-hmm. And who were your parents?
My father was Marion H. Cooper, who was a longtime resident of Hillsboro, and my mother was Cindy Billsland Cooper, who was from
Spell that middle name, spell that name.
It's Bilsland, Billsland. And she was from Covington, Indiana. And my dad was working at the county farm at the time, and he met mother who lived just 1.5 miles or so from the county farm.
And were you raised around your place of birth?
Let's see, we moved to West Newton, Indiana, and then after the Depression, we moved back.
After the Depression, yeah. Was it ever over?
I don't know. Well, anyway, we moved back to Hillsboro, and my dad farmed on the thirds down there for Tom Taylor. And that was one of his big jokes. Is Abe Martin used to be in the Star, and he said, "Wanted man to farm on the thirds."
Did you, what kind of a farming operation was that? Dairy or?
No, just general farming. We had cows and horses and pigs and everything.
Where'd you go to school, Marion?
Well, I went to school at Hillsboro.
And graduated from Hillsboro High School?
High school.
There are a lot of Marion Coopers around,
yeah.
Aren't there? Your name ever get mixed up with any of these male and female?
Well, I'll tell you what, of course it's spelled Marion, M-A-R-I-O-N, and it did get mixed up one time when I was living in Fountain County. There was 4 of us there, and I had a little situation. I was working for a finance company at that time, and this prosecuting attorney here in Montgomery County didn't like the way I repossessed a car, and he filed a suit against me for auto banditry. And I called my manager at Lafayette, Indiana, and he said, "Well, don't worry about it." And I said, "Well, I am worried about it because I've been down to Covington, and a fellow down there said, 'Don't go in the courthouse or they'll pick you up.'" And I said, "Well, maybe we ought to have him pick up my dad and get him for false arrest." But then, anyway, my manager finally got a hold of Wernle and Ristine, and They hid me in the closet here for a while.
That was down on a little bit west of here on Main Street.
It was on where the bank used to be.
Yeah, oh, upstairs.
Upstairs,
yeah.
Right.
Well, let's get you out of high school now, Marion. What happened after that?
Well, I worked at about everything you could find. You see, this was in 1933, and jobs were hard to find. You just had to do whatever you could. And I painted on a crew that did work for one of the insurance companies, and they owned most of the farms at that time. And we'd go around and paint them up, and then they'd try to sell them. And then I got a job in Indianapolis at a grocery store. And then finally I got a job in a Roy Wilmot Ford dealer. And the first job I had was cleaning motors in cars, for used cars. And you'd work yourself around. So you got clear around the car, you know, you'd work this side, and then you work that side, and then you'd work the front door and the back trunk, and you'd work this door, and you get around here. And that was the prize job because there would be money in that seat. You know, you'd clean the seats on the inside of the car. And everybody worked hard.
Small change.
Yeah, that's right. But 40 cents was a big day. And then my dad knew a fellow by the name of Barkus that lived here. He was in the oil business, and his brother was a manager of the Associates Investment Company, I believe, in Marion, Indiana. And he recommended me to go to South Bend, and I went up there, and I got a job. And I worked for them.
Repossessing cars or what?
No, I was in the office then.
Okay.
But I finally got to repossess them, of course. But then I went to, I went to Elkhart Branch, and then I went to Flint Branch, and that's where I went into the Army from.
Okay. Now, when did you go in the Army?
I went in the Army February the 19th, 1941.
So that you were in before Pearl Harbor then?
Yeah.
And were you a draftee or did you volunteer?
Well, I'll tell you, that was kind of interesting because I kept telling my branch manager I was going to have to go. I knew my number was coming up.
You weren't married, of course.
No. And he had been a chiropractor before he became a branch manager. And he
leads naturally into the job.
Right. Anyhow, he said that I would never go because I had flat feet. So my number came up and I went down. They told me when I'd have to report. So I went home and bid everybody goodbye and left my job and reported in at the right time, and they said, "Oh, you don't need to go for 3 more months." And I said, "Well, you only had to go in for a year, you know."
Yeah.
And I wanted to get my year over. So I said, "Well, you surely can do something, can't you, to go? I want to go now." And they said, "Well, you can volunteer, sign this piece of paper." So I signed it, and I always said I was not one of the regulars, I was just a volunteer.
Where'd you go from there?
Well, I went to Battle Creek, Michigan, and we got some clothes. They threw some out. You kind of had to trade around to get the
That was Camp Custer?
No, it might have been. I can't.
It must have been Camp Custer if you were at Battle Creek.
I can't remember though. But anyway, we got on a troop train and went to the Presidio of San Francisco. Beautiful place there. And those people had been there, meaning the G Company of the 15th Regiment. And they had been there for 11 years. And they were
regulars.
They were, yes, they were really regular. And we took our basic in the rain. It was in February. It rained all the time.
Where do you go for basic out of the Presidio?
Right on the Presidio, right there. You just trained right there.
Firing weapons? And
well, now we did ride out over the bridge and up in the mountains there to do that.
Was the Golden Gate Bridge there at that time?
Yes, it was. I was on there was 3 floors, or no, there's 4 floors, I guess, and I was on the 4th floor, and I could lay on my left ear and look out and see the Golden Gate Bridge. And I thought that was really something because probably Flint is the farthest away I'd ever been in my life. See? So.
Well,
yeah.
You were at the Presidio. How long was basic training at that time?
6 weeks. And we got, I think we got $21 a month, and they took out $3 PX checks. So you really only got $18 in cash. And they did that because some guys would get in a crap game or a poker game, lose all their money, and then they didn't have anything to buy shaving equipment and stuff. You had to buy $3 worth of PX checks. The interesting part about being there was that after you got through your basic and learned how to look sharp, and they taught you how to look sharp, you could go downtown for, let's see, I think 10 cents, and you could come back for 10 cents. But if you got downtown, you didn't have to worry about getting back. So somebody'd pick you up, take you in for dinner, and maybe a show, and then they'd bring you back. So it was real. And another interesting thing about that was after we left the Presidio, we went to Fort Lewis, Washington. And when we got back from there, we came back before we went to Fort Ord, and you go downtown and nobody paid any attention to you because it had been a great influx of troops. See? Yeah. So the honeymoon was over.
All right, you went then to Fort Lewis from the Presidio.
Yeah.
How long were you up at Fort Lewis?
Well, let's see. I thought I was going to die up there because I rode the back end of a truck going up, and I caught cold. And when we got to Fort Lewis, it started raining again. See, we just come out of the, well, matter of fact, I went to hospital for 4 days in the Presidio. And then when we got to Fort Lewis, I wouldn't go to the hospital, but I'd eat my supper, and then I'd go right to bed. And I did that for 30 days, and I finally got well. And then from then on, I was just perfect. I beat it, so to speak.
Your flat feet didn't stop you a bit.
No, I came right out.
All right, and how long were you up at Fort Lewis?
Well, let's see, I think we were up there till probably, went up there in the fall, I remember. And I think we came back down through to go to Fort Ord, California.
Where were you when Pearl Harbor came along?
Oh, now that's good. I know it's still there. That's December the 7th. That's an interesting story. I'm glad you asked that.
Well, one reason they're doing this, on account of this being the 50th anniversary of Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why we're...
Okay. I was a corporal by this time because I told my first sergeant that I had to get some kind of a rating. My mother kept writing to me and telling all my buddies were staff sergeants and master sergeants. And I said, you got to at least make me a corporal. And I have to tell you a little more about that, though, because, see, with this background I had from the finance company, they looked at your 201 file and they found out I'd been in an office. Well, he wanted to know if I could type, and I said, sure, I could type. And he had been in the Army for 18 years by this time, and he didn't want to spend so much time in the orderly room, and he wanted some guy to sit in there, so I did. Well, he finally made me a corporal, and that's how he could do it. His real clerk was down at headquarters, down at battalion headquarters. But I fell in there, and so that day, December the 7th, I was charged of quarters.
Yeah.
And there was hardly anybody.
On a Sunday?
On a Sunday, there was hardly anybody there. I don't suppose there's out of 187 men, I bet there wasn't 50 men there. They're all out. Tacoma and Olympia and Seattle. And when we got the word, which seemed to me was early in the morning, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon we had everything packed and everybody back but one guy that was on vacation from Nevada, and on leave from Nevada. And we got our orders to go to Seaside, Oregon. and that's right on the coast. There wasn't anything there much then. I guess there's quite a bit now. But we all had 6 rounds of ammunition. We didn't have any mortars. We didn't have any machine guns. We didn't have any artillery. And it was almost a criminal offense to fire your rifle until something showed up, because with 6 rounds of ammunition, that's all we had. And we stayed there for about 2 weeks, then we went back. And
why did they send you to Seaside, Oregon out there?
well, I of course can't answer that, I don't know, but then I would assume that that was one point that they could probably land. See, it was a beautiful beach.
Yeah.
And I assume that they sent all the other troops along the beach somewhere. And then we went to, from there we went to Fort Ord. And while I was in the...
You might tell, say, where is Fort Ord?
Oh, well, let's see. Fort Ord is, well, everybody knows about the Carmel, where the big golf course is. It's the Japanese club. And it's close to that. And I can't think. Well, there are 2 other towns right there. I can't think of.
What did you do down there at Fort Ord?
What did I do?
Or what did your outfit do?
Well, I'll have to tell you another story first.
Oh, good.
When you're sitting in the orderly room, I mean, all day long, you know, you run out of things to do, and so you start reading the Army regulations and the bulletins. And the bulletins come in from the Army regulations. Well, I always read the bulletins. And they started talking about OCS. In other words, so I sent and got applications for the Officers Candidate School at Benning. I got it for the engineers, for the artillery, and for the Signal Corps. And I filled one out for myself, you know. Well, the company commander was a nice guy, and I'd always speak to him when he came in, but I couldn't go in and see him without getting the first sergeant permission. So one day I had these all filled out, and I went over to Top, and I said, "Top, I'd like to have your permission to talk to the company commander." He said, "What do you want to see him for?" I said, "Well, I want to talk to him about going to OCS." He looked me right straight in the eye, and he said, "You wouldn't make a wart on a second lieutenant's ass." And I said, "Well, you know, Top, I didn't ask you that. I have your permission to go in and see the company commander." He said, "Go on." So I went in, and he said, "Sure, fill them all out, and I'll sign them." So he was not a West Pointer. He was a college
reserve
officer.
Yeah.
And nice fellow. And so I waited and waited, and pretty soon orders came down for me to appear before a hearing board. And I went up, and I thought I blew it because there was a lieutenant on it, and I've been reading these bulletins, and it changed the table of organization in the heavy weapons, in the machine gun platoon. And I mentioned that because it's just fresh on my mind, you know. And he said, "No, that's not right." And I said, "Well, I just read it the other day." And he said, "Well, that isn't right." And I said, "Well, you're the lieutenant, I'm the corporal, and you're right." Before that whole board. Yeah, let it go at that. And so pretty soon my orders came through to go to Benning.
Oh.
But now you asked me where the company went. They went down to San Diego to do amphibious landing. And then from that time I left Company G and went to Benning.
When did you arrive at Benning?
Let's see.
Just roughly.
Roughly.
Yeah.
August.
August of 42.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. 40.
you have any recollection what your class number was?
Yeah, 87.
And how'd you get along down at Benning?
Well, they
Go over to Phoenix City at all?
No, I never left. I never left there but one time, and that was to go in and get my uniform fit. The hardest part for me was the calisthenics, and you don't know it at the time, but those guys, they really turn the heat on you. They try to bust you out. There's 200 come in, and they want to only graduate 100. They want 50%. And it was hard for me to do push-ups. And this guy'd stand over me, and he'd say, you know, come here, you do this. I give it the old college try, but it was tough.
Run around the barracks several times?
Well, I never had to do that because I kind of, you know, I learned enough with the boys that had been in San Diego or San Francisco, how to kind of keep yourself from getting into that.
Well, I remember when I was at Benning, we'd come home from a hike somewhere and be exhausted, and they'd say we're going to run around the block here for a while before we go and rest. Go ahead.
Well,
how did you find the fellows at Benning? How did you find those other officer candidates?
Well, I thought they were a pretty high-class bunch of people themselves.
A lot younger than you, though, weren't they?
Oh, yeah, they were. They sure were. But I thought they were pretty good. I had one guy by the name of Waldo, and he'd get the whole second floor gig because he couldn't make his bed. So I finally just started making his bed for him, you know. And you know what? He wound up being the aide to the general. He did, no kidding. And they stopped at a restaurant somewhere in Maneuvers down in Tennessee, and they got about 50 miles down the road, and the general says, "Where's my coat, Waldo?" And Waldo said, "I don't know." He left it at the restaurant. Well, let's see, one more story about OCS, and then I'll quit that. If you get through, then they ask you what you think of it, see, and this, you don't know whether you got your,
whether you're going to make it.
Whether you're going to make it or not, so you have to be awful careful what you say. He said, "What's the thing that impressed you the most?" And I said, "Well, the timing. In other words, the trucks, when you come out of the morning, you could see the trucks, and they crossed roads, you know, just like that, and then there'd be another and go this way, and the timing was almost perfection." Now he said, "What's the thing that you like the least?" And I said, "Okra soup." And I really did like the soup, but I knew I didn't want to criticize him or the company commander or anybody, you know, that'd be terrible. Yeah, let's see, from there then I came back to Camp Atterbury. And
this was in the fall of 42?
42, September, would that be right? August, September, October. And I went to I Company, 3rd Battalion, 331st Infantry of the 83rd Division. And I got the 3rd Platoon, and then we just trained there all around into the winter and everything. And let's see, finally I got my first lieutenant bars while in that first 4 or 5 months. And we kept, we had some field problems, and then we went to, we were getting ready to go on maneuvers in Tennessee. And the company commander, his name was Wentworth, came up to me on a field problem and said, "You're in charge of the company." Well, I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to Benning to learn heavy weapons." So he was going to go to M Company then. And then after that, we went on maneuvers in Tennessee, and we maneuvered all over that. And we had a big problem, a real big one. Had, I don't know how many divisions involved in it. And the objective was Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I had the lead company. And I knew it wasn't anything, you know, we had armbands and all that kind of stuff. And so I wasn't running into any resistance. And I wanted to go to Nashville that night to meet my prospective bride. And so
well, how'd she get her? We never heard about her. Where you met her?
Oh, how I met her? Well, let's see.
How did she wind up in Nashville, and we haven't heard about her yet?
Well, she was in Hillsborough too.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But how we really met, to really...
You don't, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
Go ahead with
well,
your...
I mean, no, I'll tell you, because it all leads in here.
Okay.
Well, nobody had cars, and I could ride the bus from Atterbury to Indianapolis and then catch a bus to Hillsborough.
Mm-hmm.
And one night I got on that bus, and there was Mary Ellen, and we both had to stand up, see. And we stood up and talked all the way home. So I guess the next day I called her up and asked her if she'd like to go out. My brother had gone to the Army, and his car was home, and I decided I'd borrow it for a while. And I took her out to dinner, and that was the beginning of it.
All right.
And she was
that was while you were in Atterbury that you met her.
Mm-hmm.
Did she happen to just be going through Atterbury, through Edinburgh, Indiana?
Did she happen to be? Or no, did I?
Yeah. You said you were at Atterbury.
Yeah.
And how did she happen to be there?
Well, we met on the bus in Indianapolis.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
And rode home together.
I see. All right. That's good.
And she used to be my neighbor. There's only one house between us. Mm-hmm. But she's 5 years younger than I am, you know, mm-hmm. And I never really noticed her until she grew up. And so, well, I got to get back to...
You're on maneuvers.
Yeah, I'm on maneuvers and going into Murfreesboro. And so I knew if I could get into Murfreesboro and capture Murfreesboro, it'd be over. The program, the project, or whatever you want to call it, I forget the word for it. So I just got on both sides of the road and took off. And we got into the outskirts of Murfreesboro, and here come a Jeep down the road just busting, and the guy got out and he said, "Where are you from? What company are you from?" And I told him. He said, "You can't do this. You're gonna ruin the problem." That's the word. He says, "This thing's not supposed to be over till 10 o'clock tonight." I said, "Well, I'm going to Nashville. You can run it any way you want to." No, he said, "You take your troops and get back up to a certain line." So I went back. I finally got in there about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock that night. But that's how we got acquainted.
All right. Where did you go from? Did you go back to Edinburgh? To Atterbury?
No, we went to Breckenridge, south of Evansville.
Okay.
Kentucky.
Kentucky.
And then we did mostly there training for overseas movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most, you have to make a lot of decisions when you're ahead of 187 men and 6 officers. And we were following artillery at 2,000 yards. Mm-hmm. And the 329th, the 330th, the 331st. Well, that's the way we followed it. The 329th was first. And then the 330th was next. And the people right in front of us, the 329th got in and came back. And the 330th went through them and up 2,000 yards in front of them. And the artillery had some bad powders and something bad. And it landed right, of course we moved up too, see. Mm-hmm. And it landed right in front of them, which made it maybe only about 1,000 yards from where we were.
Mm-hmm. Now when's this happening?
This is at Camp Breckenridge.
Okay.
Well, you know, what are you going to do? Are you going to take your troops up there and take them through that, right over those people, or are you going to say, no, we're going to stay right here? Well, I knew they'd lift. They'd lift the guns, mm-hmm. which would send that projectile at least another 1,000 yards out, mm-hmm. see? So I said, what we'll do, we'll go up there, but we'll stay short. So we went through and over those people and up maybe 500-600 yards beyond them. And boy, it did land just about where I thought it would. And they had a big ruckus over that, I tell you. Mm-hmm. So that was one big decision. And the good Lord was with me on that one. So then after that, well, let's see, somewhere in there I got married. I can't remember just, well, it was in September, and September the 15th, and we were supposed to be married at Camp Breckenridge, and everybody was at the chapel. They had a band and everything, and so we went over and got our license, and then they told us, we told them, I guess, that we're going to be married in Breckenridge. And they said, you can't be married at Breckenridge, that's in Kentucky. You have to be married in Indiana. So we had the preacher with us. I don't know why we had him with us. But anyway, we did. And so I had my good friend, my guy's going to stand up with me, George Orr, and he said, well, come on, we'll find a place to get married. So we went by a church, and there was some people standing around outside, and he went in, and they were getting ready for a wedding, and he came back out, and he said, come on in. We went in, and old Swartout, the fellow you know, and he gave the sermon, and he said, now you can kiss the bride, or he gave the procedure, and he said, you can kiss the bride, and I kissed the bride, and he said, well, he said, that was so good, I'll just pronounce you man and wife. So that's how we got married.
Was this Swartout the fellow who married you, or the preacher in the church?
No, he was our battalion
chaplain.
Chaplain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're really not really married.
Well, yeah.
Because you never went through the I-do's.
Oh, we went through we went through the whole thing.
All right.
He said it was so good that he just.
Yeah, Marion, let's get us overseas if we can.
Okay. Well, we went overseas from Breckenridge, and I sent my little wife home. Of course, she'd been down there with me, and that was a big emotional program. Mm-hmm. And then we went to Camp Chinks in New York, and we put concertina wire around us, and that was the end of any passes or anything. So the only interesting thing that happened there was our colonel, regimental colonel, had to take a physical, and they wanted him to take a short arm inspection, and he wouldn't do it. He'd been in the Army for, I don't know, 25, several years, 20 years. But anyway, that was the only thing that I can remember happened there. A lot of the wives followed in there, but they never did see anybody, you know, they couldn't get to it. So we went down and got on the old George Washington. Had been a quite a luxurious ship at one time, I guess. And we went over in a convoy, and that was quite an experience. You could, you know, zig and zag and zig and zag, and you look out and you see troop ships as far as you could see, and far back.
What year, about when was this?
That was in 44. I believe it was March of 44.
Okay.
And we landed at Liverpool, went into Wales, and we started, we got up to Chester, England.
That's near Wales.
That's near Wales, right. And we got to go to town a time or two. Saw the old walled city. And then we went back over into Wales and did some maneuvering. I think the most interesting thing there, we were down in a valley and had our tents pitched and all of our supplies and everything, and there was a small creek there. I suppose it was, the banks of it must have been 10 to 15 feet wide and maybe 6 feet deep. And way back up in the valley it had been raining. And as you watch it come a long way, that creek kept raising, raising, raising. Pretty soon it went over and we lost some equipment and stuff. And then we went from there. We finally got on a train and went down to Southampton. And this is getting around into June or the end of May. And we stayed there a little while. The only thing interesting that happened there was I'd lost some machine gun parts back up in Wales, and we couldn't get them. So I started to the depot to find them, and I saw the general's car coming. I stopped the Jeep and got out and waved him down, you know, and went up the side of the car, and he said, "What do you mean, stopping my car?" I said, "Well, I've lost some parts and I need to get them, and I figured you, the man, could get them for me." He turned to his aide and said, "You go with him and get that man." So, and then he turned to me and said, "Don't you ever stop my car again."
What general was this, you know?
General Macon. Don't you ever stop my car again. I never forgot that either. And we loaded onto this old British ship, and we got over there, and you know, we was over there the next morning.
Over where?
Over to Normandy.
Okay. Where did you ship out from?
Southampton.
Southampton. Yeah. Were you on a ship or an LST?
No, we were on a ship. We had a whole battalion on the ship.
Well, what port did you land in?
Well, we landed at Normandy, on Omaha Beach.
Oh. You had to have something to get you in from the ship, though.
Yeah, well, we had, it looked like a big rowboat to me. We didn't get on the LSTs. And
by that time, Omaha Beach was cleared, though.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's even an airport up there. We could look up to the right and see an airport. Where there's, what was those, DC-3s?
Yes, yeah.
And the bad part was you could look up to the left and see a bulldozer bulldozing out trenches, and then they had body bags laying on there. That was a gruesome sight. And so this thing that looked like a rowboat, you ever see a Boston whaler?
I don't think I know what you know. I don't.
Well, they kind of come up to the end like that on both the front and the back.
Oh.
And they hold about 30 guys. They're big and had a motor on them. And the waves were way down and way up, and you had to, when you come up, you had to jump on, and then they go down, and then another bunch to jump on and get out of the way. And then they had places that had a dock there to pull up to it by this time. And we stayed out there for about, I think, 6 days. But what I wanted to tell you about the ship was that they had nothing but mutton for breakfast, dinner, and lunch. And I almost got court-martialed by a British officer. As I told him, I said, I've got my mess sergeants with me. Why don't you let me take over the mess and we'll cook our own stuff. Oh, it made him mad. He was just, and he was, had a little mustache about like yours. And he had stagged off pants and socks clear up to his knees and a whip, you know.
Yeah.
Really a British officer.
Crop.
Yeah, crop.
Yeah.
Well, they told us when we got on the beach, now I said, don't get out of the tracks. Stay in the tracks. Don't get up to the inside or the outside. Stay in there. Well, there was an outfit went up ahead of us, and some kid stepped out of it and blew his foot off, you know. And they just kept going, and I stopped my people. They got him out of the way. I didn't want to have a whole bunch step over him. But then we marched.
He was alive, though.
Oh, yeah, he was alive.
Just lost his foot.
Yeah, that's all. He just lost his foot. But we marched in then, and we went in sort of a staging area. About 2 days later, we relieved the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne. I went right in the middle of them. And I put a whole company in where they had about 12 men apiece. Well, I put 2 platoons up front and 1 in the back, but it was, I felt like that we ought to have a little more in there than they had, because they were battle-wise, you know, and we weren't.
You mean the Germans were battle-wise?
Yeah. Well, I mean, also the 82nd and the 101st was too.
Yeah, okay. Should we take a little recess here, Cooper? Why don't we have Ed turn that off and get a little drink of water here?
Yeah.
Marion, I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning of this show. I'm Bob Wernle of the Montgomery County Historical Society, and I'm a member of the board of directors of the Historical Society, and this fellow right here is also a member of the board of directors of the Montgomery County Historical Society. And I think I've already said Claire Chamberlain is here from the American Legion, and Ed Miller also representing American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and they've been our, Claire has been the one who's been coordinating this thing and getting the speakers lined up for us, and Ed's been very loyal about getting people about taping them. Well, now, Marion, we've got you over in France, and we've got a map over here in the back. Why don't you step to the map there and start talking about your wanderings through France and through Europe.
Okay. Stand on this side to start, I guess.
Okay.
I told you that we came from Southampton. I need a piece of tape on that,
okay.
And that's right here. We came across to Omaha Beach and then walked into a place right east of Insigny in France. And as I told you, we were in a defense position for some time. And then on July the 4th, we were ordered to attack the Germans. It so happened that my particular company was in reserve, and L Company and K Company were in the forward companies. And in our first attack, our objective was the town of Pierres. The first town was Carentan, and the very first town was Insignia. There's another little town in there by the name of Santini. And this is the Brest Peninsula here, and there's the Cherbourg. They jumped off and they went right into a swamp, and it was almost a disaster because they lost a lot of men, and some of them got captured. And there was a highway called the St. Lo Pierres Highway. That was our objective, to cut that road. Well, let's see. I was with the battalion commander myself, and so all at once he got hit, and we found an old piece of roofing that would come off of a barn, and we put him on that, and 4 of us carried him out. So the executive officer of the battalion was actually a PR man, and he hadn't been doing much in the way of tactical operations, and he got a hold of me and said, "We got to go down and do something." He said, "They told me to bring you down to a sunken road and go down that sunken road as far as you can go, and then turn right and go another way." Now, that's tough to do. It's to change the direction of your troops. But when we got to the sunken road, it was full of dead Americans. We caught a battalion in there, or company, and they were laying on the hedgerows one way and this way and in the middle of it. And I think this was one of my next biggest decisions, whether to go down that road or not. But you know, your orders are orders. So I told Major Brown, I said, "Well, now here's how we're going to do this. We're going to send 6 men at a time. And when they get halfway, we're going to send another 6 men. And then by the time they get to the middle, the other 6 men will be out of the hedgerow." And so it worked, because the Germans had begun to feel the pressure and had pulled back. And we got clear down there, never lost a man, never got a shot. And we got on open ground and went down. We'd been accustomed to getting maybe 400 feet. 400 feet of ground in a hedgerow, because the hedgerows were like fighting in a box, and they made pillboxes out of them, because they dig in the corners. Like if you can visualize a box, and at say this corner would be a machine gun shooting across this way, and then the box over here, he'd be shooting across this way. Besides, they'd have a tank hidden somewhere, and he'd shoot at one man. And it was really terrible. It was just almost impossible to get through. Well, we didn't lose any people there, but we got to another crossroad, and I lost some people there. I really felt bad about it, but you can't help it.
When you speak of losing them, killed?
Killed or wounded, yes. And I want to discuss fear, because you don't know what fear is till you go into battle. It's kind of eerie, though, because the fear builds as you're getting ready to go, and you know, you're going to go over the top, not like trenches, but hedgerows. You're going over the hedgerow. And you go over, and pretty soon the fear's gone and you're in the battle and you're okay. And then after you get going a while and you make it, then the fear comes back. You wonder how in the hell you did it. What happened? Why didn't you get hit? And you also have another feeling is you know you're going to get hit, but you don't know where, meaning on your body, or when, day or night, or when. It's, now, so much for that. I think probably everybody's had some kind of fear. Well, anyway, I lasted 10 days. I got hit about the 14th of July, and we were surrounded. And I got shot through the leg and didn't even break the bone. It just went along the side of it. Then I went back to Omaha Beach, clear back into here, and went back to Southampton and then over to this part of England, right along there. And sort of an interesting story there.
Well, before you go on with that, who took over from you?
From me.
Yeah, who took over for you?
Let's see.
Some lieutenant move up to?
Yeah, I'm trying to think who it was. Reedy. Mm-hmm. Lieutenant Reedy. And he took over, and then it wasn't long after that till they had the big push with the air power, you know, and everything, and that's where that happened, was right along in there. Mm-hmm. And all those hundreds of bombers flew over and all, and then they made the breakthrough to St. Lo. If I can find St. Lo.
Well,
I can do it. St. Lo's right about in there somewhere. Anyway, they made it. Reedy made it okay, and the company made it. They got a lot of replacements, so. And they went on around here, and then they came down into this area. And they had several thousand Germans bottled up in this area, and they just kept them there. And they came down into here, and they captured 20,000 prisoners out of this. The German general didn't want to give up. They had to show a show of strength. So they had some airplanes fly over and bombed a few of them and stuff like that, and he gave up. And they brought them all back.
What'd they do with 20,000 prisoners?
Well, they brought them back in. I think they brought them around into Angiers, and they turned their weapons in and everything, and they put them in a stockade for a while, and I think they shipped a lot of them to the States.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now you're over in a hospital in England.
In England, right. And I was there, let's see, July 14th to around the 1st of September, about the 8th of September. One day I got a call from the major, medical major, and I went in and saluted him, and that was useless because they didn't do much saluting of medical majors. Anyway, he said, "Where are you from, soldier?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Indiana." And he said, "What part of Indiana?" And I said, "Well, a little town about 60 miles west of Indianapolis." "Oh, what town?" I said, "Hillsborough." I said, "It's about 16 miles east of Crawfordville, or west of Crawfordville." And he said, "What town was it?" And I said, "Hillsborough." And he said, "Did you ever hear of Jackville?" That's Wallace, Indiana, which is 9 miles south of Hillsborough. That's where he was from.
Jackville.
Yeah. So he said, "Are you ready to go back?" And I said, "No, I'll never be ready to go back, but I know I'm going to have to go." So he said, "Well, your time's coming up, so nice to meet you." and I got the job of bringing 500 troops back to a replacement place there. And I'd been on a troop train this one time in my life, and I know they put guards. You know, if they stop a train, you put a guard on it, say, on each side of the train, so nobody can get on. That's about all I did to organize, except when we got back here to Omaha Beach, I had a chaplain. I had 30 chaplains in that 500. And one of them said, I got an organ and all these Bibles and all that paraphernalia there. He said, how am I going to get that ashore? And I said, well, you better have a meeting of the troops and find some of your parishioners. I don't know any of them. You're going to have to take care of that yourself. So he did. He got it all off. Well, then, after I came back, I went to, right here to Nantes.
That's where you got your first Purple Heart there.
Yeah, got the first one there. In the little town of Blaine, France there. And, of course, my idea of the whole thing was there was a German behind every bush, see? Because that's the way it was in Normandy. And it took me a little time to be able to get on a Jeep and go whizzing down the road like everybody else was. But I finally got to where I could do that. Then we moved clear across to Luxembourg, which is right there's Luxembourg City, and this is all Luxembourg. The Moselle River.
Where were the Germans when you were moving across there?
Oh, there wasn't any in here. See, that Patton had chased them all back over in here. There was some in Luxembourg, right along there. And we cleaned out Gravenmacher, Remick, and let's see. Did I tell about the ford?
Oh, sure. Tell about that. That's color.
Yeah, we had went into this town, and there was a 1935 Ford four-door sedan with 35,000 miles on it. Tires are good. Didn't have any battery. I suppose there was a battery around somewhere, but we didn't know where it was. So I got a battery out in the motor pool, and they got it painted and back up, and about 3 days later the colonel called me and said, why don't you take that car over to the 2nd Battalion commander? And I said, well, Colonel, I liberated that car. That car is mine. He said, well, he doesn't have one, so you take it over there.
He outranked you, the other guy.
Yeah, he sure did. And I said, okay, so I took it over to him. But I'll tell you about getting the Volkswagen later on. Well, let's see, we cleaned that out, and then we went...
When you speak of cleaning out, what do you...
Well, we chased the Germans back across the Moselle River. You clean the town out. I mean, you get all the Germans out of it, see.
Well, how do you do that? House to house?
House to house.
You have a regular procedure doing that?
Yeah.
Sending the guys in?
Yeah.
What do you do?
What do you do?
Well, they're crawling on their belly up to the house? And
normally, one thing you learn about fighting pretty soon is artillery. If you learn to use artillery, it's to your advantage. Why, you get a lot done that you couldn't do otherwise. You just select a town from one end to the other. That cost you taxpayers lots of money because I really used a lot of it. It just one of those things that, you know, you're saving people, you're saving men. You can't replace them. You can replace the cells, but that was my philosophy. But we'd just start at the beginning of the town and boom, 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 boom. Just, you know, raise it maybe one click and keep them coming.
When the Germans were running.
When they were running, but they'd be fanatics that would stay in there. And once in a while you'd have to go in, root them out, but you know, they know how to do it. They'd go to the door, and one guy would open the other door, and the other guy would be back there ready to shoot and all that kind of stuff. And they'd throw a hand grenade in, and then they'd go in. Just a lot of tricks. But then we went from there clear up to Aachen. See if I can find Aachen. There's Durham. I'd say Aachen would be right about in there. And we weren't that far. We weren't to the Rhine yet. We were to more like I can't remember the name of the river, but when the bulge started, we were on a line, and they smoked in front of us. And of course, we reported that right away because we thought they'd attacking us. See, but they smoked.
You mean the Germans?
The Germans smoked the line probably from where we were clear on down to where they actually went across.
How'd they smoke it? What do they do? Put
shells.
Smoke pots or
No, shells. They have shells.
Smoke shells.
Yeah. The only trouble with them, a lot of times,
blow back on them.
well, it don't only do that, but it'll explode and when it goes up, see? Well, it'll really put a blanket of smoke, but about the height of a person, it'll just be clear as a bell, see? It don't do any good. I used smoke a time or two, and I didn't want it anymore. I'd just rather take the artillery, keep it coming. Well, anyway, when the balls hit, we were up in there.
Are you a captain by this time, Cook?
Oh, yeah. I was a captain before I went overseas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I didn't put in for that myself.
Okay.
They gave me that.
Okay.
A lot of times it's putting in for stuff was a matter of typing up the form, see.
Yeah.
But anyway, we come out of there and came down here, and they told me I was leading the regiment. And I had of course we have our own Jeeps and some other trucks that we had picked up. And we'd heard all these stories about the Germans changing the signs, you know, making them go the wrong way and putting up new signs, and also that they would be at crossroads telling you to go this way, which would ride into the enemy, and so I really didn't relish that particular job, but I had a good transportation officer from some transportation division, and he had six 6x6s, and they were colored drivers. You know, I don't have any problem with that. But I had heard that some of the drivers would leave the trucks when the German airplanes had come over. So before we got in the trucks, I lined these guys up and I said, now listen, I got 26 men in the back of that truck with you, and I'm going to have one of my favorite sergeants riding up front with you. And I said, each one of them either has an M1 rifle, a carbine, or a pistol. And they're instructed to blow your head off if you come out of that truck when you're not supposed to. And I said, do you understand me? Their eyes got real big, you know. And I said, yes, sir, yes, sir. And I said, did you understand? Yes, sir. I said, have you had anything to eat? They said, no. And I said, well, go to the kitchen and get you something to eat then, because we're going to take off pretty soon. And so we had an understanding. We got there fine. And we got out of our trucks, and you could
where were you going from where to where?
Well, we were going down into Gay. No, we weren't going to Gay yet. We were going to Aachen, which is right in there. Right in that area right there. Here's the town of Gay right there, a little bitty dot. And wait a minute, I've left out the Hurtgen Forest. We got up in there somehow. I can't remember just how we did that. But I must tell you about that because this is before the bulge. The Hurtgen Forest was snow and trees and air bursts and everything imaginable that's terrible. And cold and wet, mud, and we lived through that. We lost some people, but we lived through it. And maybe we went from there to Aachen, and then out of Aachen back into Autry. I guess we got to Autry before we got to Gay. And that was the place that the battalion commander gave the battalion attack order from a building down in a ravine. You're trying to go to the line of departure before you give the order. You get up to where you can at least see the line of departure. Well, the line of departure was up on high ground. And so after he gave the order, this McNabb, my communication sergeant, and I went up there to see what was going on, and we went in a back door of a house, and we could hear a door on the other side of the building slam, and there was 2 plates and 2 civilians there, and they hadn't finished their breakfast. So we knew it's probably full of Germans. So we went around and looked at them. They were going down over the hill in the snow. It was too far to shoot them. But then the next town was Langelier and Petit Langelier, and that's what we were supposed to capture out of Autry. And it was downhill, and the snow was up to about there. That's what we'd had to go through. Mm-hmm. So when I got up there and saw that, I went back and talked to the colonel, and I said, you know, if you'll wait till tonight and give me plenty of artillery, I'll go down in there and get that town for you, but we can't get it in the daylight because they'll murder us. We could start it down that hill. Well, he didn't know whether he wanted to do that or not, so but we didn't jump off, and pretty soon we started getting shelled, and they started getting shelled and everything, and I called him on the radio, and we got a burst right above us, and it hit my radio man in the foot, and you know, some of it hit me and didn't hurt me, but then I made quite an oath over the radio. The colonel said, "What'd you say? What'd you say?" I said, "Well, my radio man just got hit, and I got a little sprayed too." And I said, "I still want to talk to you. Why don't you come up here and look this situation over?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. I've been talking to the second in command of the division down here, and he thinks maybe that's a pretty good idea too." So, so they waited, and that night we got 114 prisoners out of there. And the artillery knocked out 2 tanks. Mm-hmm. But they gave me a lot of artillery. And that's where I got my Volkswagen. And I got it out of there and got it back and painted in the back up the next day. So, and they kept it, they took it clear to the Elbe River. I didn't get that far, but they still had it when they got there. Well, then we got out of there and went to Gay, and that was really something. Because it was down, it was another down in the hill, you know, high ground here and town down in there. And it had 1 big road coming into it and 3 going out. But the Germans really was proud of that. They wanted to keep that. They didn't want us having that kind of transportation to get to their area. So,
what can you tell us approximately what time or what the date is that all this?
Well, let's see. I would say this is
maybe how long before the Battle of the Bulge? Or
well, I'd say this is before the Bulge. Maybe no. This may be part of the Bulge. It's just hard for me to remember about. Mm-hmm. See, what I'm having trouble with is remembering when we came out. I guess when we came out of Aachen, which was, I know, was at Christmas time.
Oh, well, that was
yeah.
The Bulge was about over with by then, wasn't it? Or just about that.
Well, we came down around and into it, and I think maybe this is part of that. Mm-hmm. I could look it up, but then it'd be too late for the tape. Well, then we went on we finally got everybody out of Gay, Germany, and it got kind of quiet down there, and I got up to where I could see, and I could see the Germans leaving. And they had those big long coats on, you know, and they really looked like they'd been in there for months, because they were just all disheveled and their packs were all bad. And I, the regimental commander, who I knew was right up behind me in an outpost, and I said, "Colonel, get artillery on those people. I can see them." And I said, "They're there." And he said, "I can't do it, Coop, because," he said, "I got a Captain Moore over at the right, and I don't know where he is. I don't know if he's down in there or where he is." He said, "I can't do it." Well, you know, I had a lot of respect for him anyway, but I had a lot more after he said that, because I figured I might have been over there, see.
Sure.
And, well, anyway, we chased them on down, and finally they pulled us out, and we went someplace else. Then we went to Julich, and we kind of got, we got pulled out of there and went up to Julich, and that town was absolutely flattened. I mean, it wasn't maybe a steeple or two left in a sort of a citadel. They kind of left that alone. We got through there and got out into sort of the flat ground. It seemed like we never got into any good flat ground. And we also got to fight with tanks. We had sort of what they call a combat team, which was just coming in then. And we all called up on tanks, and we had air power. They had dive bombers, and we moved, I expect, 15, 20 miles in about 2 or 3 hours. And it really was a pleasure for me, because there was some haystacks, and they dive bomb those things the Germans run out of, you know, and then the tanks just sprayed them with machine gun fire, and I just set up on that tank and just really enjoyed it.
Did you, Coop, you had an interesting experience, interesting living experience with some cows one time. Where did that happen?
That happened in Gay, Germany.
Tell us about that.
Well, you know, it was snowing at that time, and you couldn't get warm because you couldn't get in any houses. There wasn't many houses there, and generally the battalion headquarters had all those. So I knew these old cows were down there, and I went down there to see if I could find a place to get warm myself. And this old cow was all stretched out there asleep, and I just laid down, you know, put my back right up to her. Just got as warm. It really got nice and warm, just toasted. I had some guy from the division came down to my headquarters one time around Langelier, Petit Langelier, and said that my company had more frozen feet than anybody. And I said, "Well, I'll tell you, Colonel, I used to be afraid of you guys. You really worried me." But I said, "I'm not a damn bit afraid of you anymore. So the only people I'm afraid of are the Germans, and they'll kill you." And I said, "Now I'm going to tell you about the frozen feet. We've run out of dynamite sticks, and we can't get a shovel in the ground, and you can't keep those people walking all the time, and I'll be damned if you're going to get them to sit down and take their shoes off and rub one another's feet." When the Germans are only maybe 500 feet over on the other side. And I said, "How'd you like to have a cup of coffee?" He said, "Fine." He had me come clear back to the kitchen, see, so instead of coming up to see me, he went way back to the kitchen. So I went to get a cup of coffee and went back up again. I figured if I got reclassified, that'd be fine. I didn't care.
Oh.
Well, anyhow, we went on from there, and we got into the town of Hamerden, and we got a counterattack, and my communications sergeant and I was walking down the street, and I said, "Mac, we better get in somewhere." And he ran across the street and went in, and I ran in the street and caught the door like that. As I did, I got a piece of shrapnel through my hand from the shot on the building.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the end of it for me.
And that was all?
That was the end.
Where'd they ship you?
Well, let's see, I went to Liège. And from Liège, I took a train, went back by motor that way.
Mm-hmm.
Took a train to Paris, and I was about 4 blocks from the Church of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And of course all the windows were out of it and everything was all boarded up. And they're still selling filthy pictures on the street down there though. And let's see, what else? Oh, I've taken penicillin. And I started taking it in, I guess I started taking it in Liège. And they give it to you every 4 hours. And they give it to you in the arm, and this hip, and then this hip. And they start up here again. And I took that for 15 days. And you had to go to they had a special urinal to go to. And your urine would go into a big bottle. I mean, it was a big one, about that tall, about that big around. And they said they refined that and got the penicillin out and used it again.
Is that right?
That's what
I've
they
never
said.
heard of that.
I never did either. I mean, that was the story.
Well, did you go back to England then, or where?
Yeah, I went back to. No, I didn't either. Yes, I did. I went back to England from Paris, but I caught a boat home right away.
When were you discharged? When were you discharged after that?
Well, no, I went to Jackson, Mississippi, and they operated on my hand, took the bone out of my leg, patched all those things there up, and I still got a pretty good hand.
Now, you got some medals out of that.
Oh yeah.
Why don't you show us those?
Okay.
Why don't you use that to point them out?
You see it okay? Okay, this is a Silver Star. I have 2 of those. I have 2 Purple Hearts. I really ought to have 5, but I only got 2.
Well, you mentioned only two times you were hit. Were you hit before beside that?
Yeah, I got hit in the knee and I got hit in the back, but they weren't big enough to, you go to the aid station, you say, I've got a Purple Heart, but I need some aspirin. And this is a Bronze Star, I got 2 of those. And I have 3, what's that? Major battles. And I forget what these are.
What, your Silver Star, what was that? What were those for?
Well, one of them, I can't remember what the other one is, but one of them was knocking out a tank in the hedgerows when we first started. We had what they called Purple Heart Crossroad, and this colonel we had, did I tell you about the colonel that we had in the hedgerows?
No, you didn't.
Didn't I? Well, we got time to tell that?
Sure, go ahead.
He was, he'd been in Panama and Alaska. I'll not tell you his name because I don't know if he got out or not, but I'd rather not mention his name. As they say, if you can't say something good about somebody, you don't have to say anything.
Yeah.
But anyway, he almost drove me crazy. And I finally decided the only way to get through that crossroad was to go around to the right. He wanted to go right straight over it, see? So I finally got about 10 men and went around myself. And one guy had a bazooka and the tank was coming down the road right in front of us. And I said, get that tank. And the kid that had the thing, he missed it. And I said, let me have that thing. And I put on the glasses, and they all fogged up, and I said, oh, the hell with that. So I threw the glasses away, and they wired it up, and you It's easy to fire them. I mean, I don't know how you'd ever miss one. And it hit. And you know what they do? A bazooka shell hits. It heats the metal, and then the metal explodes inside the tank. And sometimes I guess it'll go on through and go out the other side. But anyway, that's what I got that one for. I think the other one was for going up a hill somewhere where there was a German trench. You could see the trench. And I led a group up that. I don't think I really had anything for that, but they gave me one anyway.
When you speak of they gave me one, who gave?
Well, I suppose the battalion command post somewhere. I mean, how they hear this stuff, they don't see it, they hear it from somebody else.
What about the Bronze Star? What'd you get that for? Or can't you remember?
Can't remember.
Okay.
I think it's mostly for, it isn't quite a good conduct thing. It's, you know, you've done something above.
Yeah. But you've got some pictures there.
Yeah.
Could you show us some things that, you think you can get those, Ed?
Good try.
I tell you what I'd like to do is to tell you that this book, it says See It Through, and it's a history of the 331st Infantry of the 83rd Division. And I have posted a copy of this with the, is the military history? Is that?
The local history room at the library.
Yeah, local history room at the Crawfordsville Library. And anybody's interested, they can go and look at it.
Your picture's in there a couple of places, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
I'll have to let it down there. Yeah. Here's one in the Herkimer Forest. It's that picture right there, and that's
You're in that picture?
That's one right here, yeah. And that's a Lieutenant Fever, and that's a Sergeant McNabb.
I think maybe the thing to do is to let people go to the library and look at it. If you've got a copy of it there, let's do a little more on your own background, Marion, before we run out of tape here, and tell about your. You got home when you were discharged, where and about when?
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's see. I went, as I told you, I went to Jacksonville, Louisiana, and was operated on there and sent home. And then I turned in down at Atterbury, and at the hospital there. And that was in about probably August of *46.
After the war was...
After the war was over, yeah.
And when were you discharged?
September of '46.
And you were... when did your children start coming along?
48.
And was Steve the oldest?
Steve's the oldest. And then Cindy.
Cindy, and what's her name now?
Her name is Cindy Snipes.
Snipes. And where is Steve now?
Steve's in Grand Rapids,
Michigan. And where is Cindy?
And she's in Carmel, Indiana.
And what about Jamie? Where is he?
He's in Annapolis, out on South Meridian Street, about 7700 South. And David Lane.
What'd you say?
David Lane.
Oh.
And that's right across from the German Park.
Did you? What happened after you got back from the service?
Well, of course, I'd been with Associates Investment Company before the war, and while I was on leave from Jacksonville, I went up to South Bend and met Mr. Morris, who was owner of the thing, president, and chief executive officer. And of course, I had my hand in the cast, you know, and he wanted to know that another fellow up there that owned a company in Marion, Indiana, or Muncie, Indiana, that made shells for the war, and that was his contribution, see. I expect he made a pretty good price on his shells, but he's a nice fellow. And he wanted to know what I wanted to do when I come back, and I said, well, I want to come back to the company, and I'd like to go to Indianapolis, because that's close to my town. So I got a letter from the branch manager in Indianapolis, and he said to come in, he wanted to talk to me, and I went in and talked to him, and so I was separated, I think, on a Saturday, and I went to work for them on a Monday.
Mm-hmm.
So
what did you do for them?
I was just a collector.
Mm-hmm. Now, you, of course, your children started coming along, and how long did you stay with associates?
Well, let's see. I left the Indianapolis branch in '47, and we moved back to Hillsboro, and we bought Marion's mother and father's house. Mm-hmm. And I had roofed the thing while I was on leave from Jacksonville. I could do this. I could make a. So I got some shingles and roofed their house for them. I didn't have anything else to do, so, and I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah.
So I made sure I didn't hit my hand. Yeah. But then I sanded the floors in and papered it and painted it.
And then you left Associates, though, didn't you?
Yeah.
And about when was that?
Well, that was in August of '49, and our good friend Paul Houston got that job for me.
Oh.
Yeah, he did.
Uh-huh. With the Elston?
Yeah, he recommended me to Hurt Morris.
Uh-huh. And how long were you with Elston?
31 years.
You wound up on the board of directors, didn't you?
Yeah.
And what was your title at that?
What was it? Senior Vice President.
When did you retire?
I retired June the 30th of 1980.
Now you live out in Sycamore Hills, don't you?
Yeah.
When did you build your house out there?
1958. Moved in February of '58.
Uh-huh. And you're on the board of directors of the Historical Society. Been there for quite a while.
Yeah.
Well,
that's about it.
Well, it's a great story. When you were hit, when you got those Purple Hearts, did they send a telegram back home to
Oh, yeah.
Marion? What did that telegram say?
Well, most of them said he's been seriously wounded. See, and of course, I'd write, by the way, and say, if you get one of those seriously wounded or I've been killed, it's not right. I'm in great shape. I can walk.
Did it come by telegram?
Yeah, sure did.
And do you attend any reunions of your own?
Oh yeah, I go to two of them. The Company I has a reunion. See, I trained Company I, and then I got hit. And when I come back, he gave me Company K. See, the regimental commander. And I said, when he told me I was going to K, I said, well, that's a good company, but I'd rather have Company I back. And he said, well, we got a good man down there now. He said, you go down and take care of Company K. I said, yes, sir. So that's all there was to that. But I tried him anyway, yeah. So the Company I group hang together real good. And I try to go every 5 years.
Where have they met?
Oh, they meet in, let's see, last time was Springfield, Illinois. And I went to that one because I had twofold. I wanted to see Lincoln's home and all that stuff over there. And they've been up at the first town north of Fort Wayne, Angola. Angola. And they've been at Atlanta, They meet every year. And then I have two spatial friends. Well, I have several in this I company and several in K company are spatial friends. But I think my two spatial friends are James McNabb from King of Prussia, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
And Walter Ashmore from Macon, Georgia.
Do you hear from those fellows
All the time, yeah. Every Christmas. And matter of fact, I just talked to McNabb over the last weekend. His son, James F. McNabb, and that's what his name is, 43 years old, was in the Vietnam War, and he was in this last war. He's in the reserve and he got called up. So he's coming home the 16th of September, or April.
You know, we've covered so many things, Marion. You think of anything we've missed that we ought to cover?
Well, when I get home tonight, or when can I review this?
Oh, sure. That's what we want you to do.
Yeah. When I do that, I'll think a lot of things.
What I thought maybe is if you find something you want to add on to that, we can come back and you can hook it on there at the end. So in the meantime, we sure do appreciate your giving us all this. That's it's been one of the good.
It's
Is it going?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, Bob, let's see. I better.
Gotta come around that way.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
I better.
Marion Cooper is going to do a little addition. He's had time to read over this, to look at this tape, and wants to make some additions to what he said earlier.
Now, in the tape, Bob, I got kind of. You probably ought to introduce yourself again.
Yeah, I'm not working again. I'm in the beginning of this tape. So.
Yeah, I thought maybe. Anyhow, I got confused in the timing of the Hürtgen Forest and Gay, Germany, and Autry and Aachen. So I thought I'd get that straightened out. Actually, we were in the Hürtgen Forest here first, and then from the Hürtgen Forest went on over to Gay, Germany. And let's see, there's the Hürtgen Forest right there. And there's Bastogne, and there's Gay right down there, real close. I guess that actually is the Hürtgen Forest, and that's Gay, Germany. And this was before the bulge.
Oh.
That was December the 6th and December the 10th. December the 6th in the Hürtgen Forest, and December the 10th in Gay, Germany. Those were two real tough battles. I mean, they were, as I said in the tape, they were really proud of Gay, and they wanted to keep it because it had so many roads going out of it. Well, from there we went back into Belgium and got replacements. We lost a lot of people going through those two tough places because not only from fighting but also from frostbite and tree burst and all those kind of things. Went up to Aachen and defended along the Rohr River. And then the bulge came, and then we came back down. We went into, let's see, it seems to me we were in 3 countries. We came out of Germany, into Belgium, into France, and then back into Autry, which I believe was in Germany. Did that all in one evening, one night. And then we fought there, and
Now, was that part of the bulge?
that was part of the bulge.
Autry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was right at Christmas time. See, the
Did
bulge,
you see Patton?
well, not there. I saw him way back here in the hedgerows one time. I remember him real well because to be such a tough man, he had such a high-pitched voice. And the thing I remember he said was, he says, they mine a lot of places, but he says, don't worry about that, just go through them. Blood and guts, his guts and our blood. Well, anyway, we came out of there and cleaned that up, and then we we supplied our troops and equipment, and that's when we went up to Julik and took off across with a combat team. That if you can enjoy war, I enjoyed that because we really moved. And that's all I need that for there.
Okay.
Now I want to, I mentioned two of my good buddies in the service, and I wanted to mention one more because if he ever sees this tape and I don't mention him, I'll probably have a big allocation. I have a George Orr from West Virginia, and he was my machine gun and mortar platoon leader. And one interesting thing about him, we're on maneuvers in Tennessee, and the battalion commander said, you go over and protect the right flank of the regiment and also the division. And it was real high ground over there. It was in summertime, you know how hot it gets in Tennessee. And of course, being from Indiana, I went right straight up the hill, see? So every 45 minutes we'd stop and rest. He'd come charging up there and he said, you damn flatlander, he says, you don't go straight up a hill. He says, you go up the side of it, like that. He says, so it's easier to climb, you know. West Virginia's full of hills. I was at a bank meeting one time, and Marion and I just sat down at a table where a lot of people were, and I asked where they were from, and said West Virginia, and I said, well, I don't suppose you know anybody I don't know the fellow I know in West Virginia, but I know George Orr from Kingwood, West Virginia. This guy said, yeah, he's my cousin. Well, anyway, then I want to tell about Colonel York, who became a major.
Yeah, that you had.
Did I tell you anything?
No, you didn't.
No.
You had the literature there about him, but you didn't tell that.
Well, in the hedgerows, I'll take you clear back to the hedgerows, we were really shot up. I mean, our people were shot up, and our officers were shot up. And he came to us from Africa. He'd been in Africa. And he was a West Pointer. And the first thing he did when he got there, he fired a half-hour barrage out in front of our front line. Then he came up. And he came up and met every company commander that was on the line. He'd already met the other guys. And the minute I saw him, just like that, I thought, boy, we've really got to get him. Because when he talked to you, he looked you right in the eye all the time. He didn't want any foolishness. And he had a great countenance about him, and he'd smile when he talked to you. He'd compliment you, just everything else. I'm just, boy, just like that. I knew I was going to like him, and I knew he was going to do a great job for us. And he did. So.
Was he any relation to Alvin York?
No, not that he knew of, because I asked him that question. And the last time I saw him was in 1984 in the Pines of New York, over in New York. I can't remember the name of the town. But it was at one of these reunions that I told you that I go to occasionally. And he didn't look too good then. And about a year later, he found out he had cancer, and then he died soon after that. What
was his rank?
He got to be a major general. And he took the 82nd Airborne down to Panama, I believe, and he was the head of Benning. He was the commanding officer down in Benning, Georgia. I can't remember much more than that. Well, he was in Vietnam too. He was over there in the staff position. But great man. I wrote a testament that you read.
Yes, I saw that.
And I said that he was. Everybody had to have a hero, and he was mine because he did such a great job. Then I wanted to straighten out about my job situation. When I moved from, it's kind of, you know, you don't always make a clear picture.
Yeah.
And I said that I went to work for Associate Investment in Indianapolis, and then I came down to Lafayette Branch, but I lived at Hillsborough. And I didn't make that quite clear, and I guess I wanted to clear that up because it kind of sounded like I was out of a job. And Paul Houston got me a job, and what he did, I guess he was in the bank one time, and Herb Morrison, the president of the bank, nice fellow, he was a good guy, I thought. And he asked Paul if he knew anybody that could start an installment loan department.
You were just the man.
And Paul says, I know just the man for you. And so he told me about that, and I went in and applied for the job.
Oh.
That's about it.
Well, that's very interesting, Cook, and it's great to get this sort of thing on record. Because
I think it is too. I want to see all the other tapes.
yeah, we're going to have a bunch of them.
Yeah.